All right, so today we have with us Dan Buettner. Dan Buettner is a National Geographic Fellow and New York Times bestselling author that wrote the book, The Blue Zones, The Blue Zones Solutions and Thrive, Finding Happiness the Blue Zones Way. He's been on Oprah, he's been on Dr. Oz, he's been on Anderson Cooper 360, and he has a TED Talk called How to Live to Be 100 Plus that currently has almost 3 million views. Dan Buettner himself is also a serious athlete and actually holds a Guinness Book World Record for transcontinental cycling. He rode more than 15,000 miles from Alaska to the tip of South America and has ridden his bike across the Soviet Union as well, covering more than 13,000 miles. He's an athlete, he's a scholar, he's a genius. Dan, thank you so much for being with us today.
Would you just read that over again? I just yeah, believe me, it's my pleasure being here.
Let's start with you telling us, what is a blue zone?
A blue zone is one of the 5 parts of the world where people live measurably longest. There's one in Okinawa, Japan, the longest lived women in the world, the longest lived men in the highlands of Sardinia. In Costa Rica, the Nicoya Peninsula, they have the longest disability-free life expectancy in the world. They lived to a healthy age, 92. Loma Linda, California are the longest lived Americans. They live about 10 years longer than the rest of us. And then the last blue zone, the island of Ikaria, Greece, where people not only live 8 extra years, they do so largely without dementia. They have about 1/10 the rate of dementia that we do in America.
Interesting. Why should people living with diabetes care about these blue zones?
Because at the end of the day, longevity is more or less the same goal as living without diabetes. In other words, the same things that get you to a healthy age, 90 or 95, are the things that keep you from getting type 2 diabetes in the first place. When we talk about these longevities, hotspots, by the way, it's not because these people are endowed with any special set of genes, or they don't have any magical herbs or some kind of incredible supplement that's helping them live a long time. They're essentially living in a lifestyle and environment that keeps them from foreshortening their lives with the chronic diseases that are killing most Americans. So this offers us a sustainable ecosystem of practices that will not only allow you to avoid things like diabetes in the short run, they will also make sure you stay sharp and vital until your 90s and maybe even hundreds.
So in your book, you mentioned that only about 20% of longevity is determined by your genes, and then the other 80% is determined by your lifestyle factors. So can you kind of give us a rundown of what are those lifestyle factors that actually determine your longevity?
Well, mostly I argue that it's your environment. I think most Americans who are overweight, suffering from type 2 diabetes, suffering from high blood pressure, I actually don't think it's their fault. I think that it's a product of our environment. 1970, we had about 1/3 the rate of diabetes and obesity as we do in America today. And that's not because in 1970 people had better education programs, or because we had better diet programs or better gyms. It's because the environment we live in right now does not allow us to escape crappy food, meat and milk and candy and salted snacks, et cetera, et cetera. We've engineered most physical activity out of our life. So when you say, what are the lifestyles that most lead to longevity? It's the tiny little nudges that we encounter all day long that nudge us into eating a little bit less, eating more plant-based, moving more naturally. And when I say moving more, it's not sitting in your office and expecting to make it up in a half hour in the gym at the end of the day. That's not the way we're hardwired. I mean, it's moving every 20 minutes, a nudge of 3 or 5 minutes of movement every 20 minutes, nudging us into more social activity, who we hang out with determines our health more than just about anything else. And then something we interestingly found in blue zones, nudging us into doing the things that fulfill our life purpose. People make it a long time in life. It's because they're propelled by a meaning or a sense of responsibility that keeps them doing the right things for 9 or 10 decades.
I love it. This is great. Okay, so we love the statement that you have in your book, which basically says, I'm going to read this statement. It says, the brutal reality about aging is that it has only an accelerator pedal. We've yet to discover if a brake even exists. So the name of the game is to keep from pressing the accelerator pedal so hard that we speed up the aging process. So can you give us kind of an idea of what does that mean, and why is there no brake, and what is it that's actually speeding up the actual aging process?
Yes. So let me start by saying there are two types of aging. One aging is the technical definition of it, which is the buildup of cellular and molecular damage over time. So about every 7 years, almost every cell in your body reproduces itself, different cells at different rates, but this is kind of an average. So you're actually more of a verb than you are a noun, by the way. Almost every cell that's, if you're touching your chin right there, that chin did not exist 7 years ago. There was a different chin there 7 years ago. The stubble, however, was there a day ago. But anyway, every time cells duplicate themselves, the damage doubles. And so you start at age 12 with X, and at age 19, it's 2X, and then at 26, it's 4X. And by the time you're in your late 60s, your rate of aging is about 160 times greater than it was when you were a teenager. And the technical definition of aging is the buildup of cellular and molecular damage. And in the human species, that damage is so great that on average, the average American would be dead at 92. Your joints are giving out. Your cells reach a senescence stage where they deteriorate and don't replace themselves. So what Blue Zones focuses on is how you keep an average set of human assets going as long as possible. There's another version of aging that is trying to push the ceiling of how long the human species can live. And there's been, there's all kinds of theories. Ray Kurzweil believes at some point there's going to be a mechanical intervention where we're going to be able to maybe, live to 1,000 years. But there is nothing on the scientific horizon. There's no hormone. There's no genetic intervention. There's no pill. There's no diet. There's nothing that we can take right now to stop or even slow that inevitable buildup of cellular and molecular damage that happens throughout our lives. So the bottom line is we're shooting for 92.
So does that mean that somebody who was diagnosed with, let's say, type 2 diabetes at the age of 60, right? There's nothing that they can do. It's just an inevitable consequence of aging, or was there something that they did along the way that may have actually triggered that whole process from happening in the first place?
Well, probably with type 2 diabetes, they fell victim to the standard American diet. Most type 2 diabetes, as you know, is completely avoidable, and much of it is reversible. So in Blue Zones, these people are not only living to 92, diabetes is almost unheard of. Type 2 diabetes is almost unheard of. So the notion that, this is inevitable, it's not inevitable. And there's actually, the Blue Zone gives us a very clear set of prescriptions that we can do to avoid diabetes, type 2 diabetes.
So let's talk about that a little more. Let's talk about the diet in the Blue Zones. How much meat do people consume per week?
So for the Blue Zone solution, we did a meta-analysis, which is like a worldwide averaging of what people in Blue Zones ate for 100 years. So the wrong way to find out what 100-year-olds ate is to ask them, well, what did you eat last week? Well, the reality is they might be able to remember what they ate yesterday, but they don't remember what they ate a week ago Wednesday, and they certainly don't remember what they ate as kids. So my team at the University of Minnesota pulled up dietary surveys done in all 5 blue zones over the last 100 years to find out what centenarians were eating when they were 15 and 25 and when they had their first kids and when they were retiring. And we found a few common denominators no matter where you go and people live a long time. First of all, between 90 and 100% of their dietary intake was plants. They did eat, on average, they eat some meat, but no more than 5 times per month. And meat was usually a condiment, the size of a marshmallow or something, or the size of a deck of cards. And it was eaten during celebratory times. And in many of the blue zones, people actually needed the calories. Unlike us, we don't need the calories. But in many blue zones, the only way to aggregate enough calories was to send your goats out in the fields eating enough grasses, and then, because you couldn't eat grasses, they counted on eating the goats. Plant-based diet, mostly grains, greens, and beans. So I argue the cornerstone of every longevity diet in the world is beans. Eating about a cup of beans a day. Very little fish, oddly enough. Well, even though these places were mostly islands, people were eating fish no more than about 3 times a week. Very little eggs. They did eat some eggs, but they were from their own hens. And we don't know if they lived a long time because of the eggs or in spite of the eggs. But we do know that it was mostly a high carbohydrate diet. Probably 70% of their dietary intake came from complex carbohydrates. 15% came from oils, between 10 and 15, and the rest was protein. But protein was mostly plant protein.
So this is really interesting information because beans are they're kind of a controversial food. In the paleo movement, we're told over and over again that all legumes, whether it's beans or lentils or peas, have what are called anti-nutrients, and these anti-nutrients affect our digestive processes and they cause inflammation. And so there's a whole cohort of people that they don't touch beans because they honestly believe that beans are actually bad for them and it's going to cause more disease over time. But you're saying here that people in all of these blue zones, the one common denominator in their diet is beans. So can you kind of give us an idea of what are the actual meals they're constructing with beans?
Well, first I want to address the whole paleo movement. In Paleolithic times, the life expectancy of humans was about 26. So perhaps that diet optimizes getting to age 26. What I focused on were diets of people who were making it into their 90s and 100s with great vitality. And I can tell you, I cannot drill down to the micronutrients in beans and tell you what it is about beans, but I can tell you beyond a shadow of a doubt that on average, cultures where people live a long time, they're eating about a cup of beans a day. And it might be because they're high in fiber. They might be because when combined with grains, they make a complete protein. It might be because there are phytonutrients. It might be because it sets up your gut so that healthy bacteria, actually anti-inflammatory bacteria, can flourish. Or it might be because they're eating beans, they're therefore not eating, steak or pork or another more dangerous, less healthy form of protein.
Let's talk about nuts a little bit. So in the diabetes community, lots of people are eating nuts in pretty large quantities because it helps them balance their blood sugars. So how did the people in the blue zones, how much nuts did they have?
I'm a huge fan of nuts, and in every blue zone, it's the go-to snack. The Adventist Health Study found that people who eat about a handful of nuts a day are living 2 to 3 years longer than people who don't eat nuts. And once again, we don't know what it is about nuts. We just know that it seems to favor a longer, healthier life. And you might ask next, well, what kind of nuts? And actually, the findings are of a whole combination of nuts. And I don't think any one nut is better than any other nut. I think it's finding nuts that you like, keeping a can around your office or your home, And when you're getting a craving, and we all get mid-afternoon or mid-morning craving, that we're taking a handful of nuts as opposed to reaching for chips or something else that's more higher glycemic load.
So it wasn't large quantities of nuts. It was a handful.
Well, the reality about nuts is they're satiating. Very few people sit down with a bowl of nuts like you'd sit down with the bowl of buttered popcorn. Bowl of buttered popcorn, you just you eat a handful of nuts, and you don't really want a second handful of nuts. They're self-limiting.
Right. Okay, how about alcohol? What are the drinking habits of people in the blue zones?
So in all 5 blue zones, we see drinking a couple glasses a day, and I think significantly, it's not only what they drink. Most time it's wine, and which is not a shocker. We found some interesting varietals of wine that may have higher polyphenols. But I think more importantly is that wine tends to be consumed with the meal, which increases the flavonoid absorption. It's mixed with other foods, so you're not just getting a spike of sugar like you would if you come home from work and your stomach's empty and you pound 2 glasses of wine. It's more of a beverage with a meal there for the most part. Makes a big difference.
I bet that was probably an interesting finding.
It took a lot of research. Personal.
The way that we drink here in the United States, I know, isn't about moderation most times. It's about, let's go to a party and let's drink 4, 5, 6 glasses and then get hungover for the next 3 days. So
Yeah.
small amounts I think have a profound difference. Okay, so now let's get into habits of the world's longest lived people. I mean, you've sort of alluded to these habits. Let's talk about exercise in particular. Explain to us, what are the movement patterns of the world's longest lived people?
Well, they don't exercise, which shocks people. None of them belong to clubs or run triathlons or pump iron. But their secret is they live in walkable communities. So every time they're going to work, going to a friend's house, going to out to eat, when kids go to school, it occasions a walk. They tend to have gardens, which I think is a powerful nudge. It's not exactly the time of year that people plant gardens, but come springtime to have a garden, you put some seeds in and you're nudged every day to weed or water or till up the soil, and it's regular low-intensity physical activity. Their houses are not convenienced like our houses are. What do I mean by that? I mean that we've engineered most of the physical activity out of our lives. And in blue zone places, people are still grinding corn by hand or kneading bread by hand, which is a wicked workout. They're open cans with mechanical. They're lifting up their old garage door. They're trimming the hedge with a machete. Their day is just laced with physical activity. And I think if we're really going to beat this problem, we need to think granularly, not think CrossFit, not think, I'm going to watch TV all day and I'll make up for it this weekend when we're going to go kill it at the gym. That doesn't work. Our bodies weren't built like that. Our bodies, you look at human evolution, we've moved all the time, every day.
So in this modern lifestyle, it would be great if, I could get up and go work in the garden, or if I could walk somewhere and carry a wheelbarrow. But let's be honest, that's not going to happen. I live in an urban area, as most people do. So you mentioned earlier that moving every couple of hours for just a couple of minutes has a similar effect. So how could somebody living in an urban environment actually replicate these types of movement patterns?
Well, I think first and foremost is to learn how to take a bus. If you work in an urban area and you figure out how to get to work with public transportation, on average, you're getting between 15 and 20 minutes of physical activity every day. That's the average. Your chances of heart disease go down by about 15%, which is correlated to diabetes, by the way, the more you're moving. I think number 2, with blue zones, we have these checklists on how you can go through your house and deconvenience it. Get rid of the mechanical tools as much as you can. If you live on several floors, if your house has several floors, spread your life out so you have to go upstairs and downstairs several times a day. Make friends whose idea of recreation is physical activity. It's almost kind of going through a checklist of your daily life and consciously figuring out, how can I do the physical version and not the mechanical version.
Right. It's almost like, how can I inconvenience myself just enough that it actually promotes physical activity? I like that, actually.
Well, we're a society obsessed with convenience, and that's why we're sick. Inconvenience and discomfort are good things. We should welcome a low grade lack of convenience and a low grade discomfort.
It's brilliant. Brilliant. Okay. So now, the people, the longest lived people in the world, do they practice specific stress management techniques, or is a low stress just kind of an inevitable consequence of their other daily habits?
They practice low stress, but they don't realize they're practicing low stress. Their low stress is waking up and saying a prayer, or punctuating their daily busy life with saying grace before a meal. Or it's ancestor veneration, where they spend 15 minutes a day remembering their grandparents and their great-grandparents and kind of relinquishing their day to those ancestors. Or it's taking a nap. In Costa Rica and Korea, come mid-afternoon, they shut down and sleep for 15, 20 minutes, which we know lowers cortisol levels. They spend every centenarian in the world that we met has a garden, and garden is another thing that lowers cortisol. So these are all quote unquote stress shedding techniques, but they're not things that, are labeled as such or marketed as such. It's their time honored sacred daily rituals.
What type of social habits did you find in these blue zones?
Well, again, this also is an offshoot of their environment. So they don't live in cul-de-sacs, or they don't live by themselves on the 19th floor. They tend to live in places where there's population concentration, where they're constantly bumping into people. If you're lonely in America, it shaves about 8 years off your life expectancy. Now, about 25% of Americans do not have one friend that they can count on a bad day. That's the technical definition of loneliness. In blue zones, the option to be lonely doesn't exist. If you don't show up to church, somebody's knocking on your door. If you don't show up to the festival, somebody's knocking on your door. They live the way humans have always lived, in tribes, and connected tribes of people who are interrelated, not necessarily through bloodlines, but interrelated through common values and common religions in many cases, or common commitment for making sure the next generation is successful, and interact on a daily basis.
How does a sense of purpose affect longevity?
Again, it's one of these things that adds about 8 years of life expectancy compared to a cohort that has no sense of purpose. And I've done a lot of thinking about this, and first of all, we know it is, but I believe the reason is, number one, if you wake up in the morning and you're just charged, you have a mission, you're going to eliminate type 2 diabetes, and that's why you wake up, you're more likely to keep your brain engaged, to keep up with the research. You're more likely to make the effort to innovate and reach more people. You're more likely to take your medicines, to stay physically fit, to get enough rest, to maintain yourself. People who are rudderless in the world, they sit around and watch TV. It's like, well, why make an effort? So it's possible to cultivate that sense of purpose. We're not a culture where we're handed a sense of purpose. We have to go out and get it. And it's possible to get, and I would argue it's as important to your health as finding some newfangled diet or joining a gym.
Now, when you're talking about a sense of purpose here, we're not necessarily talking about anything particularly diabetes related. It doesn't have to be eating a certain way or trying to reverse diabetes. It could be, I want to play with my grandkids, or I really want to play the piano. I mean, that could be a sense of purpose too, right?
Yes. So purpose is essentially knowing your values, knowing what your passions, what you love to do, knowing what you're good at, and finding an outlet for those three things and living it every day. Now, reversing type 2 diabetes, as you well know, and you'll tell me better, it takes effort. It's hard. You got to change shit, and you got to do things that are uncomfortable. I would argue the propellant for making that effort is that strong internal sense of purpose. And it's very important. It shouldn't be overlooked. And the reason you don't hear about it very much, by the way, is because nobody can sell you anything. No pharmaceutical company can package purpose and sell it to you in a pill. There's no profit. But I will tell you, from spending a decade looking at the longest lived people in the world, those people are infused with purpose.
I like this quote that you can't package purpose, because it's really true, right? You got to find it, you got to make it work, and you got to live by it, because that's ultimately what's going to be the propellant, like you're saying, for all of your other daily habits.
Exactly. And I promise you, it's out there. It's out there for everybody watching this. It just takes a little effort. There's a great book by Richard Leider called Finding Purpose, and I recommend that. I would argue he's one of the best guys in the country for really thinking through how people, especially at a certain age, find that, because when you're young, you have your children, you have your job. That's often a really strong reason to wake up in the morning. Where it really starts to hit people is around retirement age. So finding that non-work sense of purpose, when you're your guy's age, I know you're infused with it, but this company, might get bought out someday, and then what's the next thing I'm going to do? Well, I think it's really important to know what the non-work activity it is that allows you to live out your values. And it just takes a little effort, but a hell of a lot less effort than going to the gym every day.
Okay, so final question here. Somebody with pre-diabetes or diabetes walks up to you and says, "Hey, Dan, I have 60 seconds. I want you to give me a recommendation for what I can do to maximize my longevity and maximize my quality of life." What do you say?
Number one, if you can't measure it, you can't manage it. Come to the bluezones.com website and take our free vitality compass. It will, in 3 minutes, it'll tell you how long you're going to live and give you a half a dozen customized recommendations on how to live longer. Number two, I do an inventory of my social network of friends. And I would, if you don't have 3 or 4 healthy, plant-based, ideally vegan friends, go out and figure out a way to make them. And these are not only friends who eat plant-based, but friends whose idea of physical activity, of recreation, is physical activity. And then I would think about setting up my kitchen so that unhealthy foods are more inconvenient. And if you really want to avoid diabetes, move into a healthier neighborhood than you. If health were a recipe, the most important ingredient in getting healthier is moving to a healthy place. So places like Minneapolis, San Luis Obispo, Boulder, Colorado. If you're living in Alabama or Louisiana, I hate to say you got uphill valley, but there's a dozen places. You can go to the Gallup WBI website, and it will tell you the healthiest place in America. If health is what really matters to you, move to a healthier place.
It's something I never really thought about, but I think you're right. When you surround yourself with healthy people who have healthy daily practices, it's contagious, right? You have no choice but to adopt those same principles, and then, just as a matter of fact, you end up becoming healthier as a result.
If your 3 best friends are unhealthy and obese, there's 150% better chance that you'll be overweight yourself. So health behaviors are as contagious as catching a cold. A lot of us have just, through inertia, ended up with not so healthy friends. It's our job, if you want to get healthier, to curate that group. We call it a MOI, MOAI, of healthy friends, and hang out with them.
This is great. Thank you so much, Dan. Really appreciate you taking the time. You're a hard man to lock down. Really appreciate it. We're going to link up everything on the page so people can find you, find your books, the website, and all that stuff. So thanks again.
If you guys haven't read the Blue Zones yet, or maybe listen to the Blue Zones audiobook, do it. It's a brilliant book. There's so many small little nuggets of wisdom that you can take away from this and actually incorporate into your own life. And Dan is responsible for all of that. So thank you again, Dan. It was really helpful.
Well, I want to salute you guys for bringing this health message to a whole new level. And anytime I can help, call on me.
Thank you.
You got a deal. We'll talk soon.
All right, guys. See ya.